My hands still smelled of earth and freshly cut grass as I walked up the porch steps of my house in Ardencroft. It had been a hot day, and working on the property outside of town had taken more energy than usual. 70 is an age when every movement takes a little longer, but I never complained of fatigue. My garden was the only place I'd felt truly at peace since Edward's death 3 years ago. I'd inherited it from my aunt, and I'd gone there almost every day from spring to late fall. The tomatoes I'd grown from my grandmother's recipe, and the apple trees Edward and I had planted when we were young. The earth doesn't cheat, doesn't betray, doesn't demand explanations. You put labor into it, and it yields fruit. The keys jingled in the lock, and I pushed the door open, expecting the usual silence. Instead, unfamiliar voices came from the living room, a man's booming laughter and a woman's chirping. I took off my gardening shoes and listened. The voices came not only from downstairs, but also from upstairs, from my bedroom. As I climbed the stairs, I noticed that the carpeting had shifted. On the banister hung someone else's coat, a man's coat, gray, smelling of tobacco. The air was scented with an unfamiliar perfume, sweet and cloying. I heard someone fiddling in the bathroom connected to the master bedroom. The sound of running water, the shuffle of slippers on tile, the clatter of a tube of cream against the sink. My hand froze on the doorknob. I could hear voices outside my own bedroom door. Nella, where did you put my blood pressure pills? A man I didn't recognize asked. In the nightstand, Gordon, where I always put them, the woman answered in a slight southern accent. Next to the eye drops. I pushed open the door. I saw a scene that made me freeze on the threshold. An elderly couple was making themselves at home in my bedroom. The man in striped pajama pants was rummaging through the nightstand drawer, my nightstand, where my personal belongings, Edward's pictures, old letters, and pills were. A woman in a turquoise robe sat on the edge of the bed and spread cream on her legs, leaving white marks on my bedspread. On my dressing table were someone else's bottles, combs, men's cologne. The closet was ajar, and I could see strange things on hangers next to my dresses. On the windowsill were someone else's glasses and an old leather wallet. Excuse me, I said, trying to remain calm, but this is my bedroom. The couple looked at me in surprise, as if I were an intruder in my own home. The man was tall, with sparse gray hair and the red face of a man who likes to eat a heavy meal. The woman was overweight, with fine curls and thickly painted eyes. Oh, you must be Evelyn. The woman gave me a patronizing smile. I'm Nella Finkley, and this is my husband, Gordon. We're Clive's parents. Tabitha told us everything. Gordon nodded, not stopping his search in the nightstand. He retrieved my hand cream and set it aside as if it were an unnecessary trifle. It's nice to finally meet you. Clive's told me a lot about you. It's a nice house, spacious, and comfortable, Nella added, wiping her hands with my towel. We can't afford one of those in Texas. It's all small, cramped. I stood in the doorway, trying to make sense of what was happening. My brother-in-law's parents were sharing my bed, using my things, and talking to me as if I were a distant relative they'd honored with a meeting. Gordon finally found his pills and swallowed one, drinking water from my glass on the nightstand. Where's Tabitha? I asked. Downstairs, making dinner, Nella answered, continuing to massage my feet. Such a thoughtful girl. We're so glad we're finally here to visit. Clive's been asking us to come to Ardencroft for ages. He said it was a good hospital, Gordon added. There's only a vet and a paramedic in the town, and at my age, I need constant checkups. I turned and went downstairs, feeling something hot and unpleasant boiling in my chest. In the kitchen, my daughter was standing at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. Clive was beside her, chopping vegetables with a blunt knife I'd been meaning to throw away for a long time. Their children, 12-year-old Tristan and 10-year-old Fiona, sat at the table playing with tablets, occasionally asking for juice or cookies. Tabitha looked tired. Her dark hair was in a sloppy bun, and her apron was stained with gravy stains. She'd always been thin, but she'd lost even more weight in recent years. Working at the insurance company wasn't easy for her. She couldn't be tough on her customers, too often going along with their requests. "Mom, you're back." Tabitha turned to me with a strained smile. "How are things going on the allotment? Did you pick the tomatoes?" "Tabitha, why are your in-laws sleeping in my bedroom?" My daughter stopped stirring in the pot and looked at me as if I'd asked a stupid question. Clive didn't even lift his head from the cutting board, continuing to chop carrots into uneven chunks. "Because they're our guests. Mom, Clive's parents are visiting from Texas, and they'll be staying with us for a month. Do you really want them sleeping on the couch?" "This is my house, Tabitha, and this is my bedroom." "Of course it's yours." Clive kept his eyes on the carrots he was slicing. "But my parents are elderly. They need comfort. My dad's 74 and my mom's 71. They have back problems and can't sleep on a cot." "And I'm 70, I replied. "And I have back problems too." Tabitha sighed and put the spoon away. She had a look on her face that I remembered from her childhood, a mixture of annoyance and superiority. "Mom, don't be so selfish. The guests are more important than your whims. I've prepared a room for you downstairs, next to the laundry room. It's quite comfortable." "Whims?" I felt a tightening in my chest. Wanting to sleep in your own bedroom is a whim? "Mom, why are you making a scene?" Tabitha waved her hands. "They came to see their grandchildren, to spend time with family. Don't you think it's a shame to give them a decent place to stay?" I looked at my daughter, at her husband, at my grandchildren, who didn't even look up from their screens. Tristan was muttering to himself as he shot virtual monsters, and Fiona was giggling at a video on the internet. In this kitchen, my own kitchen, I suddenly felt redundant. "The room next to the laundry room?" "Yeah, it's quiet, no one will bother you." Tabitha picked up her spoon and started stirring the soup again. "And the master bedroom is bigger, and there's a bathroom next to it. It's perfect for guests." Clive nodded, still chopping. "My parents weren't used to the inconvenience. Dad's had heart surgery last year, and he needs his rest. And my mom's a stickler for principle, and if things aren't to her liking, she can get upset and leave early." "And what's wrong with that?" I asked. Clive finally looked up at me. He had small gray eyes and thin lips that were now pressed into a disapproving line. "Evelyn, they're my parents. I don't see them much. I want them to feel welcome." "What do you think I am? An unwelcome hostess in my own home?" "Mom, be reasonable." Tabitha took my hand. "What do you have to put up with for a month? They're good people. You'll love them. And the room downstairs is very cozy. I've put new bedding there. I bought them specially at the store, with flowers." I freed my hand. "The floral linens are in the room next to the laundry room, in a house I'd owned for 40 years. The house Edward and I had bought with our savings, the house we'd put our hearts and money into." "Tabitha, I don't understand. When you asked if you could stay here temporarily after you lost your job, it was about help. It was about you needing time to get back on your feet." "We are up," Clive replied, putting the sliced carrots into a bowl. "I got a job in a warehouse. Tabitha got a job in insurance. We help you around the house, pay your utilities." "Pay?" I was surprised. "When have you ever paid?" "Clive means we're saving you money," Tabitha interjected quickly. "You couldn't handle a house this big on your own, and now we're here, helping, and you don't have to hire people to fix it up or clean it." I looked around. The house didn't look any better than when they moved in. The paint on the walls was peeling in places. One of the boards on the porch was sagging, and the faucet in the kitchen had been dripping for 6 months. No repairs had been made in 3 years. I still did all the cleaning myself because Tabitha worked and Clive thought housework was a woman's job. Mom, remember how you complained about being lonely after Dad died? Tabitha put spices in the soup. Well, now you have a house full of family. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted to say that after Edward died, I was sad, but not lonely. I had my friends, my garden, the books I loved to reread. I had my own life, nice and quiet. And now, in my house, someone was always making noise, demanding attention, leaving dirty dishes in the sink. Mom, don't just stand there. Tabitha returned to the stove. Go move your things to the room downstairs. Dinner will be ready soon, and Clive's parents are hungry from the road. What if I don't want to move into the room next to the laundry room? Tabitha froze with a spoon in her hand. Clive stopped chopping vegetables too and looked at me with undisguised irritation. Then you're selfish, said the daughter, and I'm ashamed that you're my mother. The words hung in the air like a slap in the face. The kids at the table finally lifted their heads from their clipboards and stared at us. Tristan snorted, and Fiona's eyes went wide. I stood in the middle of the kitchen where my daughter had grown up, where Edward and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 40 years, where I'd cooked family dinners on holidays, and listened to them explain to me that guests were more important than the hostess of the house. This morning I woke up in my bed, in my bedroom, despite all of last night's talk. After dinner, which passed in tense silence, I just went upstairs and went to bed in my room. Gordon and Nella had slept on the fold-out couch in the living room, and I could hear them tossing and turning and talking softly all night. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me alert. The door opened without a knock, and Tabitha burst into the bedroom. Her face was red with anger, her hair was disheveled, and her robe was stained with morning coffee. Mom, what kind of daycare is this? She stood in the middle of the room with her arms at her sides. Clive's parents were up all night. Nell's back now hurt, and Gordon's blood pressure was up. I sat on the edge of the bed and leisurely put on my house slippers. After sleeping in my own bed, I felt much better than I had last night. What do you suggest? I asked. I suggest we stop being cranky and vacate the bedroom. Tabitha's voice was getting louder and louder. Mom, they're in their 70s. Aren't you ashamed to make sick people sleep on the couch? I'm 70, I reminded her, standing up and adjusting the bedspread. And if someone doesn't want to sleep on the couch, they can get a hotel room. Tabitha opened her mouth in indignation. A hotel? You're suggesting we put my husband's parents in a hotel. I'm suggesting you don't evict me from my own bedroom. What the hell happened to you? My daughter grabbed me by the shoulders. You used to be kind, hospitable. I remember how happy you were when we had guests, cooking all day, making the best linens. I got out of her arms. I've never had guests in my bed before, and they didn't go through my personal belongings. What are you talking about? Gordon went through my nightstand last night. He was moving my meds, my pictures, and Nella used my cream and my towel. What's wrong with that? Tabitha shook her hands. They're just ordinary things. The cream, the towel. Don't you feel sorry for yourself? I went to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside the window, I could see the yard, where Clive was smoking on the porch and his father Gordon was strolling along the path, holding his lower back. Nella was sitting on a garden bench talking on the phone, waving her free hand. It's not the cream, Tabitha. Then what is it? My daughter came over to me and stood beside me. Explain to me what it is. Why are you acting like a spoiled child? I turned to her. Tabitha was 38 years old, but at this moment she looked like a cranky girl who hadn't gotten the toy she wanted. 3 years ago you moved here temporarily, until Clive finds a job, until you get back on your feet after being laid off. Temporary, Tabitha. So what? It's not like we're living here for free. How much do you pay for accommodation? Tabitha hesitated. We buy groceries. Clive fixes things around the house sometimes. What exactly has he fixed in 3 years? Well, changed a light bulb in the basement. And a faucet. The faucet's still dripping, I noticed. And the light bulb in the basement burned out 6 months ago. Clive appeared in the doorway. He was dressed in a work uniform of blue jeans and a shirt with the logo of the trucking company where he worked. His hair was thin and starting to thin at the top of his head, and there were dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. "What's going on here?" he asked. "Your screaming could be heard all over the house. The kids are awake. Mommy refuses to vacate the bedroom," Tabitha complained. "She says your parents should get a hotel." Clive looked at me as if I'd suggested throwing his parents out on the street. "Evelyn, I don't understand you. My parents are elderly, sick people. My dad had a heart attack. My mom had hip surgery. They need normal conditions." "What? And I don't need a normal environment." "You're younger than they are." Clive shrugged. "And healthier. You go to the cottage every day, work in the garden. They can barely get around." "Clive, I'm 70 years old." "So what? My mom's 71 and my dad's 74. They're older than you." The logic was ironclad. Since his parents were a year and 4 years older than me, they had more right to be comfortable in my house. "Look." Clive sat down in the chair by the dressing table. "I know this is uncomfortable for you, but they're only here for a month. Isn't it hard for you to be a little patient for your family?" "For the family?" I said it again. "I'm not family." "Of course you are." Tabitha took my hand. "You're the most important. That's why I have to set an example of hospitality and kindness. Kindness to everyone but myself." "Mom, what are you talking about?" My daughter squeezed my hand tighter. "We love you, but Clive's parents are guests, and guests should be respected." Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and Gordon and Nella appeared in the doorway. They both looked wrinkled and disgruntled. Nella was holding her lower back, and Gordon was frowning and rubbing his neck. "Good morning," Nella said tautly. "Sorry to intrude, but we overheard the conversation." "The couch is very uncomfortable," Gordon added. "My whole body aches now, and Nell's sciatica has gotten worse." "We realize this is your home," Nella continued, "but we're not here forever, just for a month. We wanted to see the grandchildren, help Clive with the repairs." "What renovations?" I was surprised. "Well, something around the house." Gordon waved his hand vaguely. "I worked as a builder when I was young. I can do some painting, some tiling." I looked around the bedroom. The wallpaper was peeling in some places. The baseboard near the window was loose, and the knob on the closet was loose. But in the 3 years Tabitha and her family had lived in the house, no one had lifted a finger to fix anything. "You see?" Nella sat on the edge of the bed and sighed. "At our age, every night without a good night's sleep is agony, and the couch in the living room isn't really suitable for a bad back." "Maybe you'd better go home." I suggested it. "Since it's so uncomfortable here." There was silence. Tabitha stared at me like I was crazy. Clive blushed, and his parents looked at each other. "Mom," Tabitha finally breathed out. "How can you say that?" "What am I saying?" "You're kicking the guests out." "I'm not kicking anyone out. I'm just sleeping in my own bedroom." Clive stood up and walked over to me. His face was hard and his voice cold. "Evelyn, I thought you were a reasonable man, but now you're being selfish. My parents traveled 1,000 kilometers to see us. They spent money to travel, took time off work, and you greet them with hostility." "I welcome them into my home," I replied, "and I give them shelter, free of charge." "Mom, stop it!" Tabitha stomped her foot. "What's wrong with you? You used to be normal. I used to have my own life and my own bedroom. And now there's no life? My daughter splashed her hands. You have a house full of family, grandchildren who love you. We're all here taking care of you. Caring? I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. How many of you have bought groceries even once in 3 years? Cooked dinner? Do the laundry? I work, Tabitha said. I don't have time for housework. Do I have time? Mom, you're at home. What do you do? Water the garden, watch TV. And we have work, kids, worries. I looked at my daughter and realized that she really thinks that way, that my life is just leisure and their life is hard work and responsibility. So, you think I should give up my bedroom and move into the laundry room? Yes, Tabitha and Clive said together. Just for a month, Nella added in a pleading tone. We'd be very grateful. What if I say no? Tabitha straightened up and looked at me defiantly. Then we'll realize that you don't love us, and that family means nothing to you. The atmosphere in the house had been tense all day. After the morning scene in the bedroom, everyone pretended that nothing had happened, but everyone tiptoed around and talked in low voices. Gordon and Nella were ensconced in the living room watching television, occasionally oohing and aahing from the pain in their backs. Tabitha was rushing around the kitchen, making dinner and muttering to herself. Clive had gone to work earlier than usual, slamming the door so hard that the glass shook. I spent the morning in the garden, weeding the carrot beds and thinking. The earth under my hands was warm and moist after yesterday's rain, and the smell of fresh herbs soothed my nerves. Working in the vegetable garden has always helped me to put my thoughts in order. When my hands are busy with a simple task, my head begins to work more clearly. Outside the fence, I could hear the voices of the neighbors, the Parker family, who had lived nearby for 20 years. Mrs. Parker was hanging laundry and humming to herself, and her husband was fixing the birdhouse in the yard. A normal, measured life where everyone knew his place and didn't claim anyone else's. By lunchtime, I was back in the house. Tabitha was setting the table, and Gordon and Nella were already in their seats, waiting for the food. The kids were playing with their tablets, occasionally raising their heads to demand bread or water. Mom, sit down for lunch, Tabitha said without looking up at me. I sat down at the table and picked up a spoon. The soup was too salty. Tabitha always added too much spice when she was nervous. Nella wrinkled her nose as she tasted the potatoes, and Gordon ostentatiously added water to his plate, diluting the broth. Not bad, he said at last, but Nella cooks better at home. I'm sorry, Tabitha said, blushing. I'm a little distracted today. That's all right. Nella forgave her generously. It's hard to get used to a new stove in someone else's house. We have a gas stove at home, but here it's electric. I ate in silence and listened to my house talk about my kitchen's shortcomings. Edward and I had chosen the stove carefully, comparing models and reading reviews. It had served us well for 15 years, and I'd never heard a complaint about its performance. After dinner, Tabitha cleared the table, and I did the dishes. Usually we did it together, but today my daughter worked silently, stone-faced. Gordon and Nella went back into the living room and turned on the TV again. The kids scattered to their chores. Mom, Tabitha finally said, wiping the table, have you thought about what we discussed this morning? I did. E? And you decided to stay in your bedroom. Tabitha froze with the rag in her hand. So you're just going to keep making fun of sick people? I'm not bullying. I'm sleeping in my own bed. Mom, her daughter put the rag away and turned to me. I'm asking you one last time. Be a human being. Give up the bedroom for a month. No. Why not? Because it's my house. Because I'm 70 years old and I'm entitled to as much comfort as your in-laws. Because I'm tired of not being asked before I make decisions. Tabitha clenched her fists. What decisions? What are you talking about? The fact that 3 years ago you moved in here temporarily, and now you're acting like you own the place, that you're using my rooms without asking permission, that I've become a servant in my own home. A servant? Tabitha's voice grew louder. Who considers you a servant? Who cooks? Who cleans? Who does the laundry? Who buys the groceries? But you stay at home, my daughter screamed. You don't have anything else to do. I have a life, Tabitha, or I did until you guys took over the house. Alarmed voices came from the living room. Gordon and Nella must have heard our conversation and were discussing the situation amongst themselves. A life of their own? Tabitha laughed an evil laugh. What kind of life do you have? A vegetable garden and a TV set. It's good that we're here, or I'd go completely wild. So, you think a lonely old woman should be grateful for any company? Shouldn't she be? Mom, look at you. You're 70 years old, a widow, living alone in a huge house. If it weren't for us, who would you talk to? The neighbor across the fence? I put the last cup in the dryer and turned to my daughter. What if I like living alone? Do you? Tabitha splayed her hands. Mom, you've been depressed since Dad died. The doctor said you needed companionship. The doctor said I needed time to accept the loss, not by cramming the house full of strangers. Strangers? Tabitha's face turned crimson. Are we strangers to you? Your in-laws are strangers. Of course they are. But they're my husband's family, so they're your family too. No, Tabitha, no, it doesn't. Clive came into the kitchen. He had come home from work earlier than usual and looked tired and irritable. His work clothes were dirty, sweat glistening on his face. What's going on here? He asked. I could hear screaming outside. Your mother-in-law refuses to vacate the bedroom, Tabitha said. She says my parents are strangers to her. Clive slowly hung his jacket on the back of the chair and looked at me. Evelyn, I'm tired of explaining the same thing. My parents are sick, elderly people. They need a proper vacation. What do I need? You need to be grateful, he said sharply, that you have a family to take care of you, that you're not alone in an empty house. Cares? I couldn't believe my ears. Which one of you cares for me? We all do. Tabitha walked over to her husband and took his arm. We live here. We make sure nothing happens to you. Make sure the house doesn't fall apart, you mean? That too, Clive agreed. It's too big for an old lady alone. An old lady? I mean an old woman, he corrected himself. I looked at them, the daughter and son-in-law, standing before me like judges ready to pass judgment. There was no doubt in their faces that they were right. I see, I said. So I'm an old lady who should be thankful she wasn't kicked out of her own home. Mom, don't twist things around. Tabitha rolled her eyes. Nobody's kicking you out. We're just asking you to vacate one room, Clive added, for the time being. No, I said firmly. Then I'll have to make the decision for you, Tabitha said. What decision? Clive's parents will stay in the master bedroom, and you'll move downstairs. Without my consent? With the consent of the owners of the house. I felt a twinge inside me. The owners? I asked again. What owners? Our family lives here. Tabitha lifted her chin. We're settled here. The kids have school. Clive has a job. This is our home now. Your home? I said each word slowly. Our family home, my daughter corrected herself, where we all live as one big family. Who owns the deed to the house? Yours for now, Clive shrugged. But someday Tabitha will inherit them. So what difference does it make? A big difference. I took off my apron and hung it on the hook. A big difference. Mommy, why are you being such a baby? Tabitha tried to take my hand, but I backed away. It's not like we're kicking you out. We're just reallocating the space more wisely. Smarter for who? For everyone. Clive's parents need a big bed and a bathroom. The kids need a place to play. And you'll be fine with a small room. You're hardly ever home. You're out in the garden. I looked at my daughter and saw a stranger, a woman who treats someone else's house like her own and thinks it's okay. You know what, Tabitha? I said calmly. You're right. Yeah? My daughter's face brightened up. Finally, you're right to say that this is your family home. Of course it is. Clive was delighted. That's why I'm moving out. There was silence. Tabitha blinked, uncomprehending. What did you say? I said I'm moving out. If it's your house, you can live in it without me. Mom, that's stupid. Tabitha laughed nervously. Where are you going to go? It's not your concern. Mom, are you out of your mind? My daughter grabbed my shoulder. What move in? This is your house. A minute ago, you said it was your house. Well, I mean, shared, family. I went up to the bedroom and pulled an old suitcase out of the closet. Tabitha followed at my heels, wailing and coaxing. Mom, what are you doing? This is an act. I silently put the most necessary things into the suitcase. A few dresses, underwear, medication, a picture of Edward from the nightstand. Mom, stop this clowning around. Tabitha tried to take the suitcase from me. No one's kicking you out. You're not? I turned to her. Then what are you doing? I'm asking you to be patient for a month, just 1 month. And then what? Then more relatives will come? Or will Clive's kids decide they need their own room? Mom, what are you talking about? I zipped up my suitcase and picked up my phone, dialed the number of Jennifer Wakefield, my school friend with whom we'd kept in touch all our lives. Jenny, it's Evelyn. Can I come visit you for a few days? Of course, dear, my friend replied. Has something happened? I'll tell you later. I'll be there in an hour. I hung up the phone and picked up my suitcase. Mom, you can't just leave. Tabitha got in my way. What about us? What about the kids? What about me? I asked. Had anyone thought of that? But you're our mom, our grandmother, who you're evicting from her own bedroom. We're not, Tabitha screamed. Just what? Her daughter opened and closed her mouth, unable to find the words. Clive, Gordon, and Nella appeared in the doorway. They all looked at me in bewilderment. What's going on? Nella asked. Evelyn's having a tantrum, Clive said. He's threatening to move out of the house. Not threatening, I said, but moving out. Why? Gordon asked, confused. Because of the bedroom? Not because of the bedroom. It's because I'm an extra in my own house. You're not superfluous, said Nella. We respect you very much. So much so that you're taking my bed and going through my things. Mom, Tabitha grabbed her head. Stop it. Why are you acting like a child? Like a child? I stopped at the door. What does a child act like, Tabitha? Naughty, demanding attention. That's right. And how does a grown-up behave? Daughter hesitates. Well, thinks about more than just himself. That's right, thinks about others, seeks their opinions, asking permission before using other people's things, doesn't take someone else's bed without asking. Mom, what does that have to do with it? Because I'm the only adult in this house, and you're all acting like spoiled brats who think the world owes them. I went downstairs and headed for the exit. Tabitha ran after me, grabbing my sleeve. Mom, come to your senses. This is your house. You can't just leave it. I stopped at the threshold and turned around. You know, Tabitha, you said the right thing today. This really is your family home. Live in it and be happy. Without me. I kicked you out of the house. Don't come here. My daughter shouted after me. The door slammed shut, and I was left standing on the porch with my suitcase in my hand. The car started the first time, as if it wanted to get out of this place as quickly as possible. In the rearview mirror, I could see Tabitha standing at the window, watching me. But I didn't turn around. Jennifer's house was 20 minutes away, in a quiet neighborhood where every lot was lined with old oak trees. My friend met me on the doorstep with a hug and a cup of tea without asking too many questions. Tact is a rare quality these days. The 2 weeks at Jennifer's went by like a blur. My friend was tactful and didn't ask questions, but I could feel her worried glances when she thought I couldn't see. Her house was small and cozy, with white lace curtains and the smell of lavender in every room. We drank tea on the veranda, read books, discussed the news. The measured, quiet life of two elderly women who didn't have to answer to anyone. But every night I lay awake thinking about my home, about Tabitha and her family taking over my rooms, sleeping in my bed, eating out of my dishes, about what my daughter said to me on the last day. "I kicked you out of the house, don't come." Those words cut into my memory like a knife. In the 3rd week, I ran out of patience. "Jenny," I said at breakfast this morning, "I have to go to my lawyer." My friend put down her coffee cup and looked at me carefully. "A lawyer? About the house?" "Yes, we need to get this situation legally sorted out." "Are you sure?" Jennifer covered my hand with her palm. "Maybe we should just talk to Tabitha again." "There's nothing to talk about. She's made it clear that she considers the house hers." "But she's your daughter, Evelyn. The only daughter." I freed my hand and got up from the table. "That doesn't give her the right to take over my property." Jennifer sighed, but didn't argue. She had known me for almost 60 years, and she knew that when I made a decision, it was impossible to change my mind. The law firm of Harmon and Associates was recommended to me by a neighbor, Mr. Parker. It was located in the center of Ardencroft, in an old brick building with high windows and creaky wooden floors. The receptionist, a young girl with a short haircut and many piercings, made an appointment for me with Mr. Harmon for the afternoon. Robert Harmon was a man in his 50s, with a neat gray beard and attentive brown eyes. His office was furnished with solid dark wood furniture, and the walls were decorated with diplomas and photographs of important people. "Have a seat, Mrs. Crampton." He pointed to the leather chair in front of his desk. "What can I do for you?" I sat down and folded my hands in my lap. "I need to evict people from my house." "I see." Harmon picked up a pen and pushed a notebook toward him. "Tell me more about the situation." I told him everything. How Tabitha and her family had moved in temporarily 3 years ago, how they'd gradually taken over the house, how it had come to a conflict over a bedroom. "And now they refuse to move out?" clarified the lawyer. "They consider the house theirs. The daughter explicitly said that this is their family nest." Harmon wrote something down in his notebook. "Mrs. Crampton, do you have the title deeds to the house?" Sure." I pulled a folder of papers out of my purse. "Here's the title, here's the deed, here's the inheritance papers from my husband's death." The lawyer scrutinized the documents, nodding from time to time. "Everything is in order. The house is registered on you. There are no encumbrances. Tell me, do your daughter and her family pay your rent?" "No." "Do you have a written living arrangement?" "No. It was a temporary solution until they get back on their feet." "How long have they lived in the house?" 3 years. Harmon put down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Crampton, legally, the situation is pretty clear. Your daughter and her family are illegal occupants. They have no right to be in the house without your consent." "But it's my daughter," I said. "Doesn't the law make exceptions for relatives?" "The law is equal for everyone," Harmon replied. "Kinship does not give you the right to live in someone else's property for free. You can sue to evict the illegal tenants." "What's the procedure?" "First, you have to send them a written demand to vacate the property voluntarily. If they refuse, we file a statement of claim in court. If you have all the documents on the house, The procedure will take from 1 to 3 months. And if they resist, then the court will issue a decision on forced eviction. The bailiffs will enforce it. I pictured the bailiffs removing Tabitha and the grandchildren's belongings from the house, and something in my chest tightened. Mr. Harmon, isn't there a softer way? Mrs. Crampton, the lawyer leaned forward. Let me be frank. Your daughter and her husband are acting like invaders. They have occupied your home, evicted you from your own bedroom, and claim it is now their property. This behavior is unacceptable, regardless of the relationship. But this is still a family that has no respect for you or your rights, Harmon said harshly. Mrs. Crampton, how old are you? 70. At 70, you have the right to live in your own home as you see fit. You have the right to sleep in your own bedroom, to control your own property, and not to be rude to anyone, not even your own daughter. His words sounded like a sobering shower. I sat in chair and thought about how over the past 3 years I'd grown accustomed to excusing Tabitha's behavior, to looking for explanations for it, to blaming myself for the conflicts. What do I need to do? I asked. Sign a power of attorney so I can act on your behalf, pay for my services, and be prepared for the possibility that your relationship with your daughter could be seriously damaged. It already has, I said. Tabitha told me so herself when she kicked me out of the house. Harmon nodded. Then let's get started. The secretary will prepare the necessary paperwork. In the meantime, tell me more about what happened in the house. I'll need all the details for a statement of claim. I spent the next hour telling my lawyer about life over the last 3 years, how Tabitha and her family had gradually taken over the house, how I had become a servant in my own home, how it had come to a conflict over a bedroom. Harmon listened intently and took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. So they not only don't pay your rent, but they require you to serve them? He interrogated. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, all on me. And when I asked for my own bedroom, they called me selfish. I see. Harmon put down his pen. Mrs. Crampton, we have every reason to file suit. In fact, we can seek compensation for 3 years of unauthorized use. Compensation? Rent. If they were renting a place like this, they'd have to pay, say, that $1,500 a month. Over 3 years, that comes to over $50,000. The figure sounded staggering. I never thought about how much money Tabitha saved by living in my house for free. But I'm not asking them for money, I said. I just want my house back. Demanding compensation is a way of showing them the seriousness of the situation, Harmon explained. Often that prospect makes defendants more likely to agree to a voluntary eviction. Okay, do as you see fit. The lawyer smiled. Good, then let's begin the procedure. First, we send them a written demand for voluntary eviction within 30 days. If they don't respond, we'll sue them in court. And when will they receive this demand? Tomorrow morning, a courier will deliver it personally in their hands. These letters usually make a big impression. I signed the power of attorney and paid the retainer. As I left the office, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. On the one hand, I had finally taken concrete steps to solve the problem. On the other hand, I realized that there was no turning back now. In the evening, I told Jennifer about my visit to the lawyer. My friend listened silently, shaking her head from time to time. So they'll get the letter tomorrow? She asked me when I was done. Yes, a demand for voluntary eviction. And how do you think they'll react? I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe Tabitha will realize she's gone too far and they'll move out on their own. Or maybe she'll make a scene and accuse you of being cruel. Maybe that too. Jennifer sighed. Evelyn, I know this is hard for you, but you're doing the right thing. You can't let people get on your back, even if it's your own daughter. Sometimes, especially if it's your own daughter, I added. The next day, I was nervous from the morning. The letter was to be delivered between 10 and 12 o'clock, and I kept looking at my watch. At 11:30, the telephone rang. "Mommy!" Tabitha shouted into the receiver. "What kind of nonsense did they bring us? What eviction?" "Don't yell," I said calmly, "and don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." "You're suing us? Your own daughter?" I went to a lawyer to protect my rights as an owner. "Mom, you're crazy." Tabitha's voice was getting hysterical. "We're family. The family that kicked me out of my own house. Nobody kicked you out. You left on your own. After you said you were kicking me out of the house and I shouldn't come." There was a pause. "Yeah, I was upset," Tabitha finally said. "I said stupid things, really stupid things, and expensive." "What do you mean?" "The lawyer's going to seek compensation for the illegal use of the apartment, $54,000 over 3 years. "What?" Tabitha yelled so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "What $54,000? We're relatives. Relatives who live in someone else's house for 3 years for free and think it's okay." "Mom, that's ridiculous. You can't demand money from your own daughter. You can demand respect for your own rights. And if you don't have that, you can demand money too." "Mom, let's meet and talk normally." Tabitha's voice became pleading. "Without those stupid lawyers and paperwork." "You have 30 days to voluntarily vacate the house," I said. "If you don't, I'll see you in court." "Mom, but where are we going to go? We don't have money for rent." "It's not my problem, Tabitha. You said 3 years ago that you needed time to get back on your feet. We've had plenty of time. But we can't afford to rent a house this big. Then rent a small one, or a room, or stay with Clive's parents in Texas." "Mom, you can't be so cruel. Think of your grandchildren." "I think about them every day, and the example you set for them." "What kind of example?" "That you can live on someone else's dime, not pay rent, disrespect your landlords, and think it's okay." Tabitha was silent for a few seconds. "So, you won't change your mind?" she finally asked. "No, then I'll see you in court," she said angrily and hung up. I put the phone down and looked at my watch. 11:20 in the morning. In a month, if Tabitha doesn't move out voluntarily, there will be a court hearing. In the meantime, I had time to prepare myself for the possibility that my relationship with my daughter might finally break down. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange calm. Tabitha didn't call again, and I almost believed my daughter had come to terms with the situation. Jennifer was more cautious in her assessment. She'd known Tabitha since she was a child and remembered how stubborn she could be. "It's too quiet," she said one evening as we sat on the veranda with cups of tea. It wasn't like Tabitha to just give up. "Maybe she's realized she's gone too far," I said, though I didn't really believe it myself. Or maybe she was preparing a counterattack. Jennifer was right. Friday morning, with exactly 2 weeks left before the 30-day deadline, my phone rang at 7:30 in the morning. It was Tabitha, and she sounded different, not angry like last time, but scared and pleading. "Mom, I'm sorry to call early, but I really need to talk to you." I sat on the edge of the bed and turned on the bedside lamp. "I'm listening." "Mom, I realized I was wrong. I was wrong. I'm ashamed of the way I acted." "I see. Can I come over to your place? Have a normal human conversation?" "Why?" "I want to apologize and talk about how we're going to live our lives." I looked at my watch. It was 7:30 on a Friday morning. Tabitha was never a morning person and only got up at this hour in extreme cases. "Okay, come back in an hour." "Thanks, Mom. I'll be on my own, without Clive. We need to talk face to face." Jennifer was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. When she heard Tabitha's call, she shook her head. "Something's wrong," she said. "Why else would she call so early? Maybe a guilty conscience. Or maybe her lawyer told her she had no chance of winning the case. Tabitha arrived at 8:30 sharp. She looked terrible, pale, red-eyed, in crumpled clothes. She looked as if she'd been up all night. Mom? She hugged me on the doorstep. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. We sat down in Jennifer's living room. Her friend had tactfully retired to the garden, leaving us alone. Tabitha fidgeted with the strap of her purse, unable to find the words to start a conversation. Speak, I said. Why are you here? Mom, I want you to withdraw your statement from the court. Why? Because we're a family. Because you can't solve family problems through lawyers and judges. How do you solve them? Conversation, compromise, mutual understanding. I'm leaning back in my chair. Tabitha, I tried to talk to you a month ago. I asked you to let me have my bedroom. What did you say to me? My daughter lowered her eyes. I was wrong. You said the guests were more important than my whims, that this was your family home, and that you were kicking me out so I wouldn't come back. I was upset. I said stupid things. Very expensive nonsense. $54,000 plus court costs. Tabitha shuddered. Mom, where'd you get that kind of money? We're not rich. That's the market value of 3 years' rent. But we're relatives. How can you demand rent from your daughter? You can demand respect. And if you don't have respect, then yes, you can demand rent. The daughter was silent, apparently thinking about what she'd heard. Mom, what if we moved out? Voluntarily. Will you take the application from the court? When would you move out? Well, we need time to find a place to live. A month, maybe 2. You have 2 weeks, I reminded him. The deadline expires in 14 days. But you can't find a decent place to live in 2 weeks. Tabitha shook her hands. Mom, be reasonable. I am. That's why I went to a lawyer when the peace talks didn't work. Mom, my daughter moved toward me and held my hands. I know I was wrong. I realize I hurt you. But think of your grandchildren. Tristan and Fiona will have to change schools, leave their friends. They already had to do that 3 years ago when they moved in with me. But it was forced. And it's forced now. You violated boundaries, and now you're reaping the consequences. Tabitha let go of my hands and leaned back in her chair. So you won't change your mind? I won't. Even if I apologize officially, in front of witnesses? Tabitha, this isn't about apologizing. It's about the fact that you think of my house as yours, and sorry doesn't change that. Yes, it does, my daughter argued vehemently. I realized my mistake. Mom, give me a chance to make it right. What chance? 3 more years of free rent? No, we'll pay for utilities, groceries, even rent. How much? Tabitha hesitated. Well, as much as we can. Clive's on a small salary, so am I. You mean a token amount that won't even cover half the costs? Mom, we're a family. My daughter tried to hold my hands again, but I pulled away. Does a family think about money? A family thinks about mutual respect. It's about not sitting on each other's necks, about asking permission before taking someone else's bed. Okay. Tabitha straightened up. Then another suggestion. Clive's parents are leaving next week. You can go back to your bedroom. We'll live like we used to, out of each other's way. Like before? I interrupted. You mean I'll cook, clean, do the laundry, and you'll live like tenants who don't pay rent? No, we'll change. We're going to help out around the house. Tabitha, in 3 years, you've never helped me with my chores. Why should it be any different now? Because now I realize I was wrong. Do you understand? I looked at my daughter carefully. Or are you just afraid of the court? Tabitha blushed. I really understand. Mom, I'm willing to do anything to get you to take back that stupid application. Anything? Yes. Good. Then here are my terms. You move out within 2 weeks, as planned. Mom! Tabitha jumped out of her chair. That's not terms. That's an ultimatum. It's a consequence of your behavior. But where are we going to go? We don't have money for rent. That's your problem, not mine. The daughter started pacing around the room, waving her arms. Mom, you realize you're destroying the family, right? That we may never make up after this? You ruined the family when you told me. I kicked you out of the house. Don't come over. But I'm apologizing, Tabitha screamed. How many times do I have to say it? Apologizing doesn't change the consequences. Mom, you've become so cruel. You used to be kind and understanding. I never used to be kicked out of my own home. Tabitha stopped in the middle of the room and stared at me. So what? Now you're going to take revenge? I'm not retaliating. I'm defending my rights. By putting your grandchildren out on the street? I'm not kicking anybody out. I just want to live in my own house. Alone? If necessary, yes. My daughter sat back in her chair and covered her face with her hands. Mom, I don't know what else to say. I admitted I was wrong. I apologized. I offered a compromise. What more do you need? Nothing. Just move in within 2 weeks. And if we don't make it, then I'll see you in court. Tabitha raised her head. Her eyes were red and tears were running down her cheeks. Mom, I'm begging you. Give us a month. Just 1 month. In that time, we'll find a place to live and move out. You had 3 years to find a place to live. But then we thought we could stay with you forever. That's right. I didn't think so. Mom, please. Tabitha slid off the chair onto her knees and grabbed my hands. I'll do anything. I'll clean the whole house, cook, do the laundry. I'll pay the rent. Just don't throw us out on the street. The sight of my daughter on my lap was unpleasant and humiliating, but I realized that any concession now would be perceived as weakness and everything would start all over again. Get up, I said. Don't humiliate yourself. Tabitha stood up and wiped away her tears. So the decision is final? It's final. And you're not afraid of being without a family? I am, but I'm more afraid of being without my home and my dignity. The daughter silently gathered her purse and headed for the exit. She turned around at the door. Mom, you're going to regret this decision. Maybe, I replied, but I don't regret making it. After Tabitha left, I sat in the chair for a long time, thinking about our conversation. My daughter had tried to manipulate me, with tears, with promises, with threats to end the relationship. But behind all these attempts, I did not hear the main thing, a sincere understanding that she did wrong. Apologies were formal, promises were empty, and tears were a way to get her way. Tabitha still believed she had a right to my house, but now she was trying to get it in other ways. Jennifer returned from the vegetable garden and took one look at me. You haven't changed your mind? She asked. No, good point. You give in now, you'll be giving in for the rest of your life. And if she really changes? Evelyn. She sat down next to me and took my hand. People don't change overnight, especially when they're up against the wall. Tabitha is afraid of the court, so she's pretending to be remorseful. Maybe she is. No, maybe she is. You know your daughter better than I do. Has she ever admitted her mistakes without pressure in her life? I thought about it, and I realized Jennifer was right. Tabitha has always been stubborn and opinionated. Even as a child, she only admitted guilt when the alternative was punishment. So we go all the way? Let's go, I said firmly. That evening, Harmon's lawyer called. Mrs. Crampton, I have news for you. Your daughter came to me this afternoon asking for a continuance. And what did you tell her? That it was your decision. She told me to tell you that she's willing to compromise. Mr. Harmon, tell me honestly, if we make concessions now, what happens next? The lawyer was silent for a moment. Mrs. Crampton, In 20 years of practice, I've seen a lot of cases like this. People who first ask for an extension, then ask for another extension, then find new reasons not to fulfill their obligations. Your daughter has been living in your home for 3 years rent-free. What's changed over the years? Nothing. Exactly. And nothing will change if you give her another month or two. So we continue? Let's keep going. The voluntary eviction deadline is in 8 days. If they don't move out, we file papers with the court the next day. I hung up the phone and looked out the window. The August night was darkening behind the glass, and the first yellow leaves on the trees were visible in the light of the street lamp. Summer was ending, and with it my familiar world was ending. Ahead was the unknown, a trial, a possible breakup with my daughter, a lonely life in a big house. But I had no choice. Tabitha had made that choice herself when she decided she could dispose of my property as she saw fit. The 30 days expired on Tuesday. On Wednesday, Attorney Harmon filed a statement of claim in Ardencroft County Court, and on Thursday, I received a call from the court clerk informing me that a hearing had been scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Only a week to prepare, a small amount of time, but Harmon assured me that it was enough with such an obvious situation. The weekend passed in anxious anticipation. Tabitha didn't call again, and I didn't know if they'd hired a lawyer or were going to defend themselves. Jennifer tried to distract me with chores and small talk, but my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming trial. On Sunday night, I went through the papers I'd gathered for the case. The title to the house, the deed, the inheritance papers from Edward's death, the property tax records, the paper history of my life, the black and white proof that the house belonged to me. Worried? Jennifer asked, bringing me my tea. Of course I am. It's May's daughter. And your house. And my home, I agreed. Tuesday morning, Harmon and I met at the courthouse at 10:30. The lawyer looked confident and calm. Blue suit, white shirt, neatly combed gray hair. I wore the black dress I'd bought for Edward's funeral and the pearl earrings my husband had given me for our 40th wedding anniversary. Are you ready? Harmon asked. Ready, I answered, though my hands were shaking slightly. The courthouse was old, built in the early part of the last century of red brick. Inside, it smelled of wax and old wood, and our footsteps echoed in the high hallways with marble floors. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, a few rows of benches for the public, a table for the plaintiff, a table for the defendant, and a dais with a judge's chair. Tabitha and Clive were already seated at the defendant's table. The daughter was wearing a dark blue suit I hadn't seen before. Apparently, she'd bought it specially for the trial. Clive wore the only decent jacket he wore to weddings and funerals. A young man in a cheap gray suit sat next to them, their lawyer by the looks of it. Tabitha turned around as we entered the hall and our eyes met. There was a mixture of resentment and hope on her face. She was still counting on me to change my mind at the last minute. I gave her a brief nod and walked to my desk. "Stand up, the court is in session," announced the clerk. Judge Patricia Morell, a woman in her 50s with a short gray haircut and a stern face, entered the room. She seated herself at the judge's desk, put on her glasses, and opened a file folder. "Case number 2025-378, she announced. Evelyn Crampton versus Tabitha Havens and Clive Havens. The issue is the eviction of unlawful occupants. The plaintiff is represented by Mr. Robert Harmon, the defendants by Mr. James Cartwright. Counsel for the defendants rose and bowed. Your Honor, I ask, leave to make a motion to postpone. On what grounds? The judge asked sternly. The defendants need additional time to prepare their defense and find alternative accommodations. Mr. Cartwright, the judge looked at him over her glasses. The defendants received a written demand for eviction 30 days ago. Is that not enough time to find housing? Your Honor, the defendants have limited financial resources, and suitable housing is not easy to find in Ardencroft. I see. Mr. Harmon, what's your opinion? Harmon is up. Your Honor, my clients have tolerated the defendant's unlawful occupancy of their home for 3 years. Plaintiffs are entitled to immediate restoration of their rights as owners. Furthermore, the defendants have made no attempt to find alternative housing during those 3 years. The motion to adjourn is denied, the judge ruled. We will proceed to the merits of the case. Mr. Harmon, state the plaintiff's position. Harmon stood up and approached the bench. Your Honor, this case is simple. My client is the sole owner of the house at 23 Maple Street, as evidenced by the documents submitted. 3 years ago, she allowed her daughter and her family to temporarily move into the house until their housing problems were resolved. However, the defendants took the temporary residence as permanent and refused to vacate the house at the owner's request. The judge nodded and made a notation in the documents. Do the defendants have a written lease or other documents proving their right of occupancy? No, Your Honor. There are no documents of any kind. Do the defendants pay rent? No, Your Honor. Not one penny of rent has been paid in 3 years. I see. Mr. Cartwright, any objections? Defendant's counsel rose, nervously adjusting his tie. Your Honor, the defendants are not illegal tenants. They live in the house with the consent of the owner and actively assist in its upkeep. In addition, there is a family relationship between the parties, which should be taken into account. Mr. Cartwright, family relationships do not override property rights, the judge observed. Can you elaborate on the home maintenance assistance? Absolutely, Your Honor. Let me call the witness. Tabitha Havens. The daughter rose and walked to the witness stand. The clerk swore her in, and she sat down, clasping her hands together nervously. Mrs. Havens, Cartwright began, tell the court about your residence in your mother's house. We moved in with Mom 3 years ago when we were having financial difficulties, Tabitha said in a low voice. It was her mother who suggested we stay with her. And how did you help your mother? I cooked, cleaned the house, did the laundry. Clive fixed things around the house. We bought groceries, paid the utilities. I looked at my daughter in surprise. It was an outright lie, and it was hard not to stand up and object. So you actually kept the house? Cartwright clarified. We helped my mother, as children should. She's an old woman, and it's hard for her to manage a big house on her own. Why was it necessary to evict her? Tabitha lowered her eyes. Mom had memory problems. She became forgetful, irritable, blamed us for things we didn't do. We thought it was age-related, but Mom saw our attempts to help as an attack on her independence. I felt the blood rush to my face. My daughter was accusing me of senile dementia right there in the courtroom. Thank you, Cartwright said. No further questions. The judge looked at Harmon. Mr. Harmon, any questions for the witness? We do, Your Honor. The lawyer got up and walked over to Tabitha. Mrs. Havens, you state that you've been paying for utilities. Can you provide documentation of those payments? Tabitha hesitated. Well, we gave my mom cash. How much? It varied, whenever we could. Give me a specific amount for any month. I don't remember exactly. I see. And the utility bills were in whose name? My mom's. So officially your mother paid all the bills? Yes, but we helped her. You say you cooked and cleaned. Tell me, who bought groceries for the family? Mostly my mom. Mostly or always? Tabitha blushed. Mostly Mom, but we did sometimes too. What kind of things did you buy? Well, bread sometimes, or milk. Who cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a family of 5? Usually my mother, Tabitha said quietly. And who did the laundry, did the dishes, cleaned the house? Mom. So your help was just buying bread sometimes? We helped as much as we could. The daughter burst into flames. Mrs. Havens, the lawyer took a document out of the folder. This is a certificate from the management company about the arrears of utility bills. Do you see the amount? Tabitha looked at the paper. I do, $4,200. If you've been helping pay the utility bills, can you tell me how you came up with this debt? Yeah, I don't know. Well, I do. Because for the 3 years you lived here, your 70-year-old mother paid all that money for you. Isn't that right? Tabitha was silent. Answer the question, the judge demanded. That's right, the daughter said faintly. Thank you. One more question, Harmon continued. You said that your mother has a memory problem. What are you basing this conclusion on? She's been acting strange. In what way? Demanding that we vacate her bedroom for the sick elderly. So your mother wanted to sleep in her own bed in her own home, and you consider that a sign of dementia? She wasn't thinking about guests. Mrs. Havens, the lawyer raised his voice, were your husband's parents invited by you or your mother? By us, without the homeowner's permission? We didn't think Mom would object, but she did, and she demanded that you find them another place to stay. Isn't that right? Yes. So instead, you told her it was your family home and kicked her out of her own place. Isn't that right? Tabitha remained silent, staring at the floor. Answer me, the judge said sternly. I was upset, the daughter whispered. Upset enough to kick her mother out of her own home? Harmon persisted. Yes, thank you. No more questions. Tabitha returned to her seat, and Cartwright called the next witness, Clive. The son-in-law looked even more uncertain than his wife and kept wiping his face with a handkerchief. Mr. Havens, began his lawyer, tell us about your contribution to the upkeep of the house. I did minor repairs, Clive said. Painted, fixed anything that broke. Can you give me specific examples? Well, changed a light bulb in the basement, tightened a faucet in the kitchen. What else? Clive thought long and hard. Painted the fence and the porch steps, Harmon's up. Your Honor, permission to question the witness. Permission granted. Mr. Havens, have you changed one light bulb in 3 years? Maybe more than one. How many exactly? I don't remember exactly. And the faucet in the kitchen is still dripping. Did you actually fix it? Clive's blushing. I tried to fix it. No luck? I suppose so. Tell me, do you work? Yeah, I'm a loader. What's the pay? $2,500 a month. And your wife? $1,500. That's $4,000 for a family of 4. Do you know how much it costs to rent a house like this in Ardencroft? No, $1,500 a month. That's practically half your household income. And you've lived rent-free for 3 years, didn't you? We helped out around the house. Changing one light bulb in 3 years? Clive was silent. Mr. Havens, Harmon continued, when your mother-in-law asked you to vacate the bedroom, what did you say? I told her that my parents deserved comfort. And what does she deserve? Well, comfort too. But the little room next to the laundry room? It's not bad there either. Did you sleep in that room yourself? No, why not? It's small. But it's fine for your 70-year-old mother-in-law, isn't it? Clive was silent. Answer the question, the judge demanded. Probably not, said the son-in-law quietly. Thank you, Harmon said satisfactorily. No more questions. Cartwright tried to call another witness, a neighbor who had allegedly seen Tabitha taking care of her mother, but the neighbor said only that he saw the daughter occasionally taking out the trash and watering the flowers in the yard. Are these all the defendant's witnesses? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Harmon, are you going to call any witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. Evelyn Crampton. I got up and walked to the witness stand. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady as I answered counsel's questions about how Tabitha and her family had gradually taken over the house, how I had become a servant in my own home, how it had come to eviction. Mrs. Crampton, Harmon asked, did you really allow your daughter to live in your house temporarily? Yes, for a few months, until they solved the housing problem. What happened instead? They stayed for 3 years and began to think of the house as their own. Did they help you around the house? No, I did all the housework. Did they pay your rent? No, everything from groceries to utilities was paid for by me. What was the final straw? When my daughter demanded that I vacate my bedroom for guests and move into a small room. And when I refused, she said she was kicking me out of the house. Cartwright tried to discredit my testimony by insinuating age and bias, but I responded clearly and consistently. The facts were on my side. After hearing all the witnesses, the judge recessed for a conference. The 20-minute wait seemed like an eternity. Tabitha and Clive sat in silence, occasionally talking to the lawyer. I tried not to look in their direction. Finally, the judge came back into the room. All rise, please. The court is now in session. We rose. Having considered the case materials and heard the testimony of the parties, the court comes to the following conclusions. The plaintiff is the sole owner of the disputed residential house, which is confirmed by the submitted documents. The defendants live in the house without legal grounds, do not have a lease agreement, and do not pay rent. The defendants' claims about household help are not supported by the facts and cannot serve as a basis for the right to reside. The judge paused and looked at Tabitha and Clive. In addition, the court notes the inappropriate behavior of the defendants in kicking an elderly woman out of her own home and arrogating to themselves the rights of landlords. Such behavior is unacceptable regardless of family relationships. I felt something clench in my chest. The judge was saying aloud what I knew, but did not dare to admit even to myself. The court grants the plaintiff's claim. The defendants are obliged to vacate the house at the address Maple Street, House 23, within 30 days from the entry into force of the decision. In addition, the court shall recover from the defendant's rent for illegal use of the dwelling in the amount of $54,000, as well as court costs in the amount of $3,000. Tabitha awed and grabbed her chair. Clive turned pale as chalk. The judgment may be appealed within 30 days, the judge added. This court is adjourned. I sat there, unable to move. 3 years of fighting were over. The house was mine again. The 30 days after the trial flew by quickly. Harmon had warned me that Tabitha might appeal, but she hadn't. Apparently, after losing in court, both they and their lawyer had lost faith in the possibility of making a difference. The facts were too obvious, and their own testimony only made things worse. During these days, my daughter called me 3 times. The first time was right after the trial, hysterical and in tears. She screamed that I had destroyed the family, that the children would now live in poverty, that she would never forgive me. I listened and hung up. The second call came a week later, more calm. Tabitha asked me to postpone the eviction for another month. They had found a house to rent, but they needed time to complete the paperwork and collect the deposit. I told her that it was the court's decision, not mine, and that 30 days was enough time to find a place to live. The third time she called was 3 days before the deadline. Her voice was tired, without hysteria or threats. Tabitha reported that they had found a small house in the suburbs, farther from the center, but reasonably priced. Asked permission to take some of the things they'd brought from the house 3 years ago. I agreed, on the condition that I attend. The last day of the term fell on Friday. In the morning, I was worried. What if Tabitha didn't leave voluntarily? Harmon assured me that in that case the bailiffs would evict them forcibly, but I didn't want to be humiliated. At 10 in the morning, a truck pulled up to the house. From the window of Jennifer's house, I saw Clive and a man I didn't know start to move the furniture out. Tabitha fussed around, showing me what to take and what to leave behind. The children sat on the porch steps with sullen faces, watching their lives being put into cardboard boxes. "Are you going to go see it?" Jennifer asked. "I will," I said. "I want to make sure they only take what's theirs." The house on Maple Street looked unfamiliar, with people moving in and out of the house from morning to night, taking things out and loading furniture. Neighbors looked out of windows and talked over fences. Mrs. Parker waved to me as I pulled up. I entered the house through the front door, the first time I'd been in a month. Inside, chaos reigned. Boxes of belongings were in every room, furniture was displaced, and scraps of wrapping paper were lying on the floor. It smelled of dust and the hustle and bustle of moving. Tabitha was coming down the stairs with a box of baby clothes. When she saw me, she stopped. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Tabitha." We stood in the hallway and looked at each other. Her daughter had lost weight in a month, with dark circles under her eyes and new wrinkles at the corners of her mouth. "How are things going with the new house?" I asked. "It's okay. It's small, but it's big enough for us. The kids will sleep in the same room." "I see." Tabitha put the box on the floor and turned to me. "Mom, are you happy? Did you get what you wanted?" I got the right to live in my own house, at the expense of throwing my family out on the street. "Nobody threw anybody out, Tabitha. You chose this path." "Me?" My daughter raised her voice. "I chose to go to court and lawyers. You chose to tell me, 'I kicked you out of the house. Don't come.' Everything else is a consequence." There was a rumble from the kitchen. Clive must have dropped something. Tabitha flinched and went to check, but then stopped. "You know, Mom, I still don't know what happened to you. You used to put your family first. Now you're willing to destroy it for some principle. Family was what mattered. That's why I put up with your rudeness and disrespect for 3 years." "Boorishness?" Tabitha laughed bitterly. "We lived as a family. We helped each other. Who helped whom? We already found out in court." "Mom, don't you realize what you're doing?" My daughter came closer to me. "You've ruined your grandchildren's lives. They now live in a rented house, sleep in the same room, changed schools. And 3 years ago, they changed schools when they moved in with me, and they survived. It was different then." "Different how?" "We moved to better conditions then, and now we're in worse conditions." I looked at my daughter and realized there was no point in talking. It was okay for Tabitha to improve her own conditions at someone else's expense, but it was unacceptable for her to take responsibility for her own decisions. "Tabitha, where's Clive? I want to make sure you only take your own things." "You suspect us of stealing?" "Just a precaution." The daughter grimaced, but called out to her husband. Clive emerged from the kitchen, sweaty and disheveled. He was holding my skillet, the same one I used to make pancakes for my grandchildren. "That's my skillet," I said. "But we used it," Clive objected. "We used mine, in my house. That doesn't make it yours." He set the pan down reluctantly. "What else did you take of my things?" I asked. "We didn't take anything." Clive took offense. "We're honest people." I walked through the house, checking the rooms. My parents' bedroom had their bed, closet, and nightstands, all of which they'd brought over 3 years ago. In the nursery, children's furniture, toys, clothes. The kitchen was missing a few little things: the corkscrew Edward had given me, the wooden cutting board he'd made with his hands. "Where are the corkscrew and the board?" I asked. "What corkscrew and board?" Tabitha pretended not to understand. "The ones in the kitchen drawer." "Oh, those. We thought they were shared. Everything in my house is mine, except what you brought." The daughter reluctantly took a corkscrew and a board out of the box and put them on the table. "Do you remember anything else?" she asked wryly. "We'll see." By noon, the main things had been taken out. The last car of little things remained: clothes, papers, children's crafts. Tabitha walked around the empty rooms as if saying goodbye. "What do you think, Mom?" she said, stopping in the living room. "What if 3 years ago you had turned us down right away? Would you have said, 'Rent an apartment and stay away from me'?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe you would have gotten back on your feet faster. Or you'd be on the street. On a $4,000 salary, you could rent a decent apartment. And you could have lived on a shoestring. But on your own." Tabitha sat on the windowsill and looked out into the yard, where the children were playing with the neighbor's cat. "Mom, don't you regret what you did?" "What did you do?" "About suing us, making us move out. I've been thinking. I regret going to court. I don't regret defending my rights." "What about losing your family?" "I didn't lose my family. My family lost me when they thought they could take advantage of my good-heartedness with impunity." "Good-heartedness?" Tabitha jumped up from the windowsill. "Mom, where's your good-heartedness? Where's your Christian charity? Where's your motherly love? Where is a daughter's gratitude?" I replied. "Where is basic respect for a mother? Where is conscience?" "Conscience? I have a conscience?" My daughter poked herself in the chest. "Where's your conscience when you kick your kids out of the house?" "I didn't kick anyone out. I took back what was rightfully mine." "Rightfully?" Tabitha laughed hysterically. "All your life you've been thinking about rights. You've forgotten about love. Love without respect is not love, but selfishness. You're a philosopher." My daughter came close to me. "Do you want to know the truth, Mom? You've become a mean, callous old woman. That's what happened to you." The words hit me like a slap in the face, but I didn't back down. "Maybe," I said calmly, "but I've become an honest old woman who doesn't let herself be exploited." "Exploited?" Tabitha shook her hands. "Did we work on a plantation? We were a family. You lived off me. That's not the same thing." "Mom," her daughter's voice became pleading, "don't you realize what you've done? Doesn't it hurt you to see your grandchildren suffer?" I looked out the window where Tristan and Fiona were playing with the cat. The kids looked upset, but not traumatized. The move was an inconvenience for them, but not a disaster. "It hurt," I admitted, "but it hurt even more to see them raised to believe that it was okay to take advantage of other people's kindness without gratitude." "What strangers?" Tabitha was indignant. "I am your daughter. The daughter who told me 3 years ago, 'Mom, we're just temporary until we get back on our feet.' And then she said, 'This is our family home.' She said it. I don't know who doesn't. It doesn't happen to me. I don't take other people's money and I don't lie to my relatives." Tabitha was silent for a few minutes, catching her breath. "You know, Mom," she said at last, "maybe you're right. Maybe we did go too far. But you've gone too far too. A normal mom would have forgiven. She would have compromised. And a normal daughter wouldn't put her mother through this. So we're both crazy. So we're both what we are." Clive came into the house and announced that the car was loaded. "Tabitha, it's time to go. The kids are tired and it's still half a day to unpack." The daughter nodded and walked towards the exit. At the door, she turned around. "Mom, what's going to happen between us now?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Time will tell." "What if I want to come visit? With my grandchildren?" "If you want to come, come. Just let me know in advance." "And we'll sit and drink tea like strangers?" "We'll sit and drink tea like people who respect each other." Tabitha was silent, thinking about what she had said. "What if I don't learn respect?" she asked at last. "Then we won't have tea." Her daughter nodded, as if she had received an answer to an important question. "I see. Goodbye then, Mother." "Goodbye, Tabitha." She walked out, and I heard the car door slam, the engine start, the sound of the truck moving away. Then the house was quiet, the first time it had been truly quiet in 3 years. I walked through the rooms, assessing the damage. There were no major breakages, but it needed a general cleanup. There were light stains on the walls from removed paintings and dents on the floor from furniture legs. The wallpaper in the children's room was covered with colored pencil drawings. The master bedroom was where I stayed the longest. My bed was still there, but the mattress was someone else's. Apparently, Tabitha had bought a new one and taken it with her. The dressing table was missing a mirror. It had been taken away, too. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. The room seemed big and empty after a month in Jennifer's house. But it was my room, in my house, and no one else could demand that I vacate it. It was getting dark outside the window. The short September day was coming to an end. Tomorrow I would return here to live alone, without my family, but with my dignity restored. It was my choice, and I had no regrets. The next day, I returned to my home. Jennifer saw me off with motherly care, handing me a jar of homemade jam and sternly instructing me to call if I needed anything. We hugged on the doorstep, and my friend said, "Remember that you did the right thing, and that I'm always happy to see you." The house greeted me with silence. There was no children's laughter from the living room, no sound of the TV running, no Tabitha's voice explaining something on the phone, just the ticking of the old clock in the hall and the sound of the wind outside the windows. I walked through the rooms, assessing the scope of the cleaning to be done. In the bedroom, I had to replace the mattress and mirror. In the nursery, I had to paint over the pictures on the walls, and everywhere else I had to scrub the floors and wipe off the dust. But the main thing was that the house was mine again. Every corner, every room belonged only to me. The first thing I did was open all the windows. Fresh September air rushed into the rooms, dispelling the musty odor of the stranger's presence. Then I put the kettle on the first time I'd made tea in my own kitchen in a month, pulling a familiar cup from a familiar cabinet. Sitting at the kitchen table with the steaming cup in my hands, I thought about what had happened. 3 years ago, my daughter had come to me in tears, telling me about losing her job and her home. I opened the door to her as I had opened it all my life, with a willingness to help, to share, to support. It seemed natural. Isn't that why families exist? To help each other out in times of need? But somewhere along the way, help turned into service, gratitude into demands, and temporary accommodation into claims of ownership. Tabitha and Clive began to behave not like guests who had been given shelter, but like hosts who were bothered by inappropriate requests. It was particularly painful to realize how her daughter's attitude gradually changed. At first, she apologized for every little thing, for the kids making noise, for Clive taking too long to use the bathroom, for having to buy more groceries. Then the apologies became less frequent, and after a year they disappeared altogether. By the end of the second year of living there, Tabitha was getting annoyed if I asked for any rules in the house. I remembered the moment when I realized something had irrevocably changed. It was last spring when I asked Tabitha not to put wet pots on the wooden table. They were leaving white stains. My daughter replied, "Mom, don't pick on the little things. This isn't a museum." I remained silent at the time, but the phrase stuck in my memory. My house was no longer a special place for my daughter, requiring careful treatment. It became just a living space that could be used without much ado. And then there was the story of Clive's parents, the last straw that broke my patience. Tabitha hadn't even thought to ask my permission before inviting guests over for a month. She simply put me on the spot. They were coming. They needed a better bedroom, and I had to squeeze in. When I objected, my daughter reacted as if I was infringing on her legal rights. In her eyes, I was not a mother who provided free housing for the family, but an obstacle to comfort, a selfish woman who thought only of herself. Guests are more important than your whims. was the phrase that echoed in my head every day of the last month. Whims. Wanting to sleep in my own bed in my own house is whimsy. I put the empty cup in the sink and went into the living room. The room seemed huge with no children's toys or adult furniture. Just my old couch, Edward's chair, and the bookshelves along the walls. The silence was absolute. No tablets, no cartoons, no negotiation about who was going to watch what. I sat down in my husband's chair and for the first time in a long time, allowed myself to just sit. Not to plan a dinner for 5 people, not to think about washing a mountain of baby laundry, not to worry about anyone at home being unhappy, just to sit in silence and listen to my own thoughts. Outside the window, the leaves rustled. The trees were preparing for fall. Mrs. Parker was sweeping the driveway in the yard, and her husband was fixing the gate. The ordinary life of ordinary people who do not claim other people's property and do not consider their relatives to owe them everything. The phone rang. Tabitha's number popped up on the screen, and I stared at it for a long time, hesitant to answer. Finally, I picked it up. "Hi, Mom." My daughter's voice sounded tired. "How are you?" "I'm fine. How are you?" "We're unpacking boxes. The house was even smaller than it looked. We're gonna have to throw some of this stuff out." "I see." There's a pause. "Mom, are you alone in there? Isn't it sad?" "No, it's not sad." "Really? I thought you didn't like being alone." "Loneliness and peace are different things, Tabitha." "Ah, I see." Another pause. "Mom, I was wondering if I could come visit you for Christmas. With presents? With the kids?" I was thinking. Christmas was always a family holiday in our house. Tabitha would bring the kids. We'd cook a turkey, decorate the tree, give presents. A tradition I've honored for 40 years. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "What do you mean you don't know?" "Tabitha, it's been less than 24 hours since you were evicted. It's too early to talk about holidays." "But the kids are used to spending Christmas at Grandma's." "The kids are used to a lot of things, but life changes sometimes." "Mom," the daughter's voice became pleading, "would you deny your grandchildren a Christmas party?" "I'm not saying no. I'm saying I don't know yet." "And what does that depend on?" "It depends on how our relationship works out. It depends on you learning to see me as a person in my own right, not as an attendant." "Mom, I said I was sorry. How many times do I have to tell you?" Apologizing and changing behavior are different things. "How will you know if my behavior has changed if you don't talk to me?" That's a good question, logical and fair. "Time will tell," I answered evasively. "Mom," Tabitha sighed, "I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But does one mistake really undo 38 years of my life?" "It wasn't one mistake, Tabitha. It was 3 years of gradually turning me into a servant in my own home." "But I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't think you'd see it that way." "What did you think?" "I thought we were a family, living together and helping each other." We found out who was helping who in court. "Why are you bringing this up again?" I could hear the irritation in my daughter's voice, even through the phone. "The trial's over. We moved out. Can't we forget this story and move on with our lives?" "Forget?" I was surprised. "Tabitha, do you really think you can forget 3 years of deceit?" "What deception? We're temporary until we get back on our feet." "Do you remember those words?" "Well, plans change. Plans change, but they give notice. You don't just say one day, 'This is our family home.'" "Mom, I've told you 100 times I overreacted, and I've tried to make excuses 100 times. But I've never once admitted that I was mean." "Mean?" Tabitha's voice turned cold. "I was mean? What else do you call behavior that takes advantage of a person's kindness and then demands more? It's not meanness, it's carelessness, an inability to express yourself." "No, Tabitha, it's exactly meanness, And until you admit it, nothing is going to change between us. So you want me to humiliate myself? Call myself the mean daughter? I want you to be honest, to yourself and to me. The daughter was silent for a long time. And if I can't? She finally asked. If I can't admit what you want to hear? Then we would be strangers. Forever? I don't know. Maybe. And you're willing to lose your daughter and grandchildren for principles? Were you willing to lose your mother for comfort? I answered a question with a question. It's not the same thing. No, Tabitha, it's the same thing. A choice between a relationship and selfishness. You chose selfishness when you decided your needs were more important than my rights. Now I'm making my choice. And what is that? I choose dignity. Tabitha hung up without saying goodbye. I put the phone down and went back to my chair. It was getting dark outside the window, and it was time to turn on the lights. But I wanted to be in the darkness, in silence, alone with my thoughts. Talking to my daughter had shown me that nothing had changed. Tabitha still saw herself as a victim of circumstances and me as an unjust mother. She was ready to apologize for the form, but not ready to understand the nature of her behavior. Maybe in time, something would change. Maybe when Tabitha faces the reality of independent living, paying rent, utility bills, having to save every penny, she will realize what those 3 years of free living meant to her. Or maybe she never will. People have an amazing ability to justify their own behavior and blame others for their problems. I stood up and lit the desk lamp. The warm light spilled across the living room, reflecting in the glass doors of the bookcase. My books, my photos, my memories, everything was in its place. Tomorrow I would begin a new life. The life of a 70-year-old woman who lives alone in a big house and doesn't have to answer to anyone, who cooks as much food as she wants to eat, watches the programs she likes, and sleeps in her own bed without fear of being asked to vacate the guest room. Perhaps this is what they call happiness at 70: peace, independence, and preserved dignity. And family? A real family is built on mutual respect, not on taking advantage of other people's kindness. If Tabitha ever realizes that, the door to my home is open to her, but it's open to a daughter who respects her mother, not a guest who thinks he's the boss.